In this series of lectures, we'll be looking at route summarization. Route summarization is known by a few different terms. Supernetting is one of them. Summary address is another. Doesn't matter what it's called, it all means the same thing. We're going to take a bunch of routes that we know about. In this case, in the diagram that you see in front of you, there are 4 routes that this router knows about. And it wants to advertise out those 4 routes, and it could do it individually, so it would advertise out each route. But a more efficient way to do it is to advertise out one route that encompasses all of these networks. And we would do that for efficiency purposes, and I'll explain where that comes in a second. Route summarization is not something you would do in your normal experience, but it is something that you are exposed to. And let me just show you what I mean by that. Let me get out of here. Imagine with me for a second that the computer that I'm on right now, and I'm sitting on a virtual machine, and that virtual machine, we'll say it's right there, it's connected to a router. And that router is connected out to every other network on the internet. So when I want to go somewhere, anywhere on the internet, which is just one giant mesh of routes and networks, I can get there through this one device. Let me demonstrate that for you. So if I want to, let's say, ping, I'll do an if config here so you can see my IP address. So if config, there's my IP address, 192.168.1.2. If I was to ping 8.8.8.8, this number is not on my network, and I would have to go through all these different routers to get there. But I can get there easily. We'll assume that's somewhere in California. How about if I want to go to, let's say we'll ping www.bbc.com, which is in the UK, I can get there too. And then we can go visit China if we want to ping www.qq.com. We're visiting China right now. I can get to any of those routes, even though if you look at my route table, I only have really 2 lines of information in the route table about this device. This first one right here, or this one right here, just specifies if there's another computer on the 192.168.1.0 network, I'm connected directly to it, I can communicate. Everything else, every single other route in the world has been summarized for me by that address, 0.0.0.0. And I send any of the pings I've just sent were sent to this gateway. So if you can just use your imagination a little bit and not think of it as a computer and gateway or a router, if we could just picture them as both being routers, so if they're both routers out here, instead of a computer, and out here is still the internet out there, well, this device is summarizing everything out by shouting out to me, I know about everything. So instead of filling me up with millions and millions and millions, or my router up with millions and millions and millions of different routes that I would have to then look through to see what route do I use to get to this, the entire internet is summarized in one simple route for me. Now, on our corporate networks, we wouldn't want to do something like that, not internally necessarily, unless we do want to point them out to the internet. But there are times where we want to, for instance, summarize, like we did in the diagram that we were looking at before. In this instance, we want to summarize out these 4 routes to the rest of our network, or maybe to somebody external to our network. So we want to summarize these out as one easy route to look up. It's more efficient. If we should lose one of these routes, we don't have to go through a whole updating instance for this router, because this router doesn't need to know all that. It'll just send its packet to here, and the router will go, oops, that route's down right now, and that'll be it. So it really makes the routing table much more efficient. We only have a couple of routes here, but just think we could easily have 10, 20, 30 different routes, and summarizing those would make it easier to move the routing information around. So next we'll look at some examples of how we actually summarize IP addresses.